Go. Perfect. All right. We'll let some folks trickle in out of our waiting room. Thank you for joining us today. So I wanted to kick this off here and welcome you all to the M1 Accelerator series. This is session 1 in a series of 3. And I'm joined here by the esteemed Paul Erickson, our Director of Mentorship here at Management One.
I make him say esteemed when he introduces me, just so you know.
It's in the script. It is.
I insist on it.
Before we kick it off, let me do a little housekeeping here, because this is a live webinar, and I know that some folks may need to leave early. Some folks couldn't join us. If you are here today, though, this is a live Q&A enabled webinar. So right down at the bottom of your Zoom screen there, if you have a question, we are going to save a little bit of time at the end. Just hit the Q&A button, and we will be addressing those towards the end, or not to mess up your flow, Paul, but if we could address it maybe right then and there, we could try to do that as well. So the M1 Accelerator series, Management One for the last 3 years has developed a wide range of educational sessions with varying degree of topics here. And we really wanted this one, originally it was actually geared towards our clients, but we thought, why not open the veil a little bit into how we use data to make decisions? Every single day, retailers have a slew of daily transactions. And if you're not trained in how to spot those diamonds, as Paul calls them, in the data in order to make actionable decisions, then you're really missing out on opportunities. And I'm really glad that we were able to get Paul's time on the calendar, because after decades of experience in retail, Paul is an absolute master at looking at the numbers and developing a story and a path forward. And that's really what this first session is all about. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Paul Erickson, and we can get started. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Paul. Future sessions. So as I mentioned, this is a 3-part series. So we also have another session on October 10th geared towards a question that we get a lot, because there is a distinction. Am I overbought or am I over inventoried? And that's going to be a really interesting discussion between Paul and another retail expert of ours, Mike Taylor. And then in December, we're going to be talking about balancing categories based on consumer demand. So you will be receiving some emails to sign up for those sessions if you haven't already.
I would just like to point out also, Nico, that December 12th is the day after my birthday.
I know where you're going with this.
And so I would just really caution against people giving me extravagant gifts. It's embarrassing on my part. And I don't know what to do with all of them. So
I'll cancel the order now.
Okay, thanks, Nico. Hi, everybody. You know, retailers come in all different shapes and sizes, and that's certainly true with our client base. And they all have different priorities. But I think there is one priority that the vast majority of all retailers have, and that is, or a goal, and that's to grow their business. And how do we do that? And how do we do that profitably? And certainly, I think, because of what we've experienced over the last year and a half in terms of inflation, we're just keeping up with inflation. It's also very, very important to look at ways to increase profitable sales. And when we do that, I think we look at, we have a tendency to look at various approaches, and I've kind of listed 5 or 6 of them here on the screen. And that could be from, trying to build more online business, to improve our conversion rates of our customers coming into the store or visiting us online. Search engine optimization. Let's get more people to the website. Maybe we should run more promotions. We need to get our people on the sales floor better trained. We need to have a really engaging store environment, and the list could go on and on and on. And those are all good things, by the way. I'm not against any of them, trust me, but I think what's lacking is, and what we don't necessarily look at, is how we manage our inventory itself. That can be a key driver to increase revenue, and that's what I really want to talk about, Nico, for the next 30 minutes. Because what's good is spending money on marketing if our actual product that we're offering is not positioned to produce more potential sales for our business? What good is increasing our store traffic when the increased store traffic encounters continual out of stocks of inventory, or they're looking at inventory, half of which has been on the floor or on the website for over 6 months or longer? But I want to start out, I want to go back 35 years. 35 years ago, Nico used to sit on my lap and I would tell him marketing stories. And that's how we got into marketing. But 35 years ago, um, there was a car called Oldsmobiles. Maybe you have to be my age to remember Oldsmobiles, but they roamed the earth and their commercials filled the airwaves. And these commercials also included the campaign that served as Oldsmobile's final and probably infamous death gasp, I think you would call it. And it's called Not Your Father's Oldsmobile. So I just want to share with you real quick an example of a commercial back in the 80s. Let me just do this.
Introducing the all-new Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. Four-wheel disc brakes, a multi-port fuel-injected V6 engine, four-wheel independent suspension, and aerodynamic styling even the wind can't resist. In short, the new Cutlass Supreme is not your father's Oldsmobile.
Wow, pretty spiffy, huh? Looks cool. Except one little detail. When the potential customers saw those ads and then visited the dealerships, they discovered that the product that hadn't changed at all. In fact, the only thing that had changed was the advertising. In fact, it still was their father's or maybe their grandpappy's Oldsmobile. And I thought this was a good example of making sure that when we spend money to entice our customers into our store, we have to make sure that the inventory is also right size to sell them when we are there. So I want to talk about merchandise planning and open to buy. We have a lot of clients on this call, and this is essentially our service that we're providing to you. But I think we think about merchandise planning and open to buy as simply one element, or it's the same element. And it's actually divided into two aspects. And so I want to deal with the two different aspects of merchandise planning, which are both incredibly important. And the first part is what really open to buy is what is your budget? That part of the budgeting of your inventory investments that has a direct relationship to cash flow. You know, for a lot of our clients, that inventory purchases can represent 50% or more of all cash outlays. And so how well we budget this, how well we strategize, and how we spend that money has everything to do with growing our business as well as simply your success as a retailer. I'll give you an example. You know, if you're $1 million retailer, you sell $1 million in merchandise a year, and you have a 50% gross profit goal, then in a very simple way to look at it, you're going to be spending at least $500,000 every single year, or over $40,000 a month on inventory. That's the first part of merchandise planning and open to buy. Those strategic inventory expenditures, and how you spend that and how you look at that has a great deal to do with how you can increase your profitable sales. Let me give you some examples. I'm going to show you some examples. This happens to be a client store. The names have been deleted to protect the innocent, just so we know. But this is actually a client store that has felt, and I know the situation here, they felt that, you know, the way they need to control their cash flow is to be so careful with buying that they ended up buying less. And you can kind of see up on the screen, I'm going to blow this up in just a second, but you can see that right up here in this top green section, which you all know as clients is your sales. You can see that we've lost $250,000 in sales just in this period of time. And you can see down here, our inventory positions have been reduced. So this is much more what I'm talking about than just simply reducing inventory and reducing purchases. I want to zoom in on this section. And those of you who know me know that Paul Erickson loves to live down at these metrics where my hand is right down here on your report, because it will tell you so much about whether you're overbuying, whether you're underbuying, what's going on in your business. When Mark Weiss designed these plans, this was, I always tell Mark this because I like to butter him up, but this was, I think, really do believe this from my heart, it was a moment of genius on how he did this. So let's blow that up for just a second and show you exactly what we're talking about into this particular store. And you should be looking at this on your own reports. In other words, if you look at what happened this year from last year, and let's see where my pointer is, we reduced our purchases at cost in this particular case by we purchased $165,000 less merchandise this past 12 months than we did the prior 12 months. And what was the purpose of that, I'm not sure. But what it accomplished is the fact that our sales went down from down $306 from 1.422 million to 1.16 million. Now, what good is it on a cost of goods purchases percentage to lower that? Because quite frankly, you do want that somewhat low. But what good is it to lower your purchases and have a lower percentage of purchases to sales if your sales go in the toilet? It actually has a counterproductive if we lose $306,000 in revenue. And so we need to look at the plan down here a lot, because this is a very revealing part of your merchandise plan. Now, what I also want to do at this point is look at this, and let's drill down and look at it by a category. Because in this particular case, I want to show you some of the things that can happen and how to look for on your plan itself to see these problems develop. In this particular case, we're going to focus on the sales, the inventory, and the receipts. We're going to follow the money. So let's zero in on what I'm talking about. This is a classification where, as you can see, if we just follow the sales last year, our sales in July were 3,700, and then we started to see these losses. This is a small category. But we lost almost $2,000 in sales in 90 days. How did this happen? And why does this happen? And why have we lost up to $2,000 in sales in 90 days? Sales rebounded in December, and we were up $2,700. And so the answer to that is simply, how much are we bringing in and how much do we own? So let's look at the inventory. As you can see, the inventory, which started at 19,800, went to 18,500, then 16,300, then 14,800, then 8,600, then oh my God, we're just running this thing right out of business. And as these inventories are falling, and by the way, very little new goods, only $1,600 came in at retail in July, only $1,600 came in at retail in August. We sent stuff back because it was so bad. We didn't get anything in October to entice our customers. But then, just in the nick of time, and Jim Dandy to the rescue, we do get, oh my gosh, we need new product here. We got $6,700, and we see an immediate increase in revenue for December at $59.93. But where were we through these months? We simply didn't pay attention. We didn't bring in enough new merchandise, and that was causing our sales decrease. Let's look at another example, and this is again following the money, if you will. You can kind of see I've got this blown up so you can see the entire category, and you can see I've kind of highlighted down here what's been happening. And I know it's small, but you can see that the last 3 months we've lost all our momentum. From last year we did 20,000. This year went down to 13,900. We only brought in $1,900 of the merchandise. Of course, we're not going to sell if we don't bring anything new in. So let's just, and I'm just going to move my thing up here so I can see it a little bit better. So let's just look at this and what happened. So our sales in this classification were down $898 in May. And then we went into a complete free fall and lost $2,300 in June and almost $3,000 in July. And now our total increase in revenue has been cut drastically to barely above last year, $3,477. How did that happen? Well, we certainly had inventory. We had a $52,000 inventory. We had $15,000 more product than we had last year. Last year's inventory was 36, this year 52. But that increase in inventory produced a $900 drop in revenue. We had $19,000 more inventory this year than last year. But that $19,000 increase in inventory produced $2,300 less sales. $5,200 more inventory in July 1 produced $2,900 less sales. So clearly, the idea that, and simply put, the more you got, the more you sell, isn't a very accurate way to run a business. What you really want to look at here is why have sales dropped is because our receiving has dropped to nothing. We only got in $2,500 in the month of May. We should bring in $5,800. We brought in $1,100 in the month of June. You know, last year we brought in maybe too much, but 17,000. We should bring in 7. So we see right here, we see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so the ugly is this year. We're receiving nothing. The bad was better than the ugly. We brought in too much in 1 month. And the good is the plan. Our plans straighten everything out. Our plans are the focus of where you should be. And you see again here the good, the bad, and the ugly, where we stop buying totally, and only $600 comes in July, and we experience a $2,900 decrease. It's not how much inventory you have, it's how much fresh inventory you have. Fresh merchandise drives the business in any retail store, in any category. What's just arrived is everything to your business. Now let's look at a metric in a completely different way, and this is a positive. Here's a small retailer, a client of ours, who decided to use our approach in terms of finding where, as Nico called it, those diamonds in the rough, and look at their data differently and how to grow it. And look what they did in 1 year. And this is the kind of thing that we do see when you start using the Management One process. Last year, our inflow of product, we bought $211,000 at cost in the store. It's a small store, and we sold $486,000. 43% of our sales were in purchases. 12 months later, we increased our purchases to $284,000, or up $72,000. We bought $72,000 more, and guess what happened? Our sales were up $174,000, and in completely lockstep with our cost of goods purchased. This is what can be achieved if we know where to look. This is what can be achieved if we know the techniques on how to do it. So let me give you another example here, and this is kind of what we see all the time. And this is a little bit of follow the money. But one of the most important things you can look at your plan, these open to buy plans seem very complicated. Here's a secret, they're really not. Just, if you ever saw the movie All the President's Men, and when Robert Redford meets Deep Throat in the garage, and he's telling him all these secrets of what's going on with Watergate, what did Deep Throat tell Robert Redford, or in this case Bob Woodward in real life? Follow the money. One of the best things you can do when reading this information that we're providing you is follow your money. Look what happened here. We get in $14,000, and now let's start out with sales. We had a $3,400 bump in May, a $1,900 drop in June, and a $3,600 bump in July. That's worse than a Frank Sinatra song. I'm up in May and down in July. What happened? Well, we follow the money, and we can see that in May, $14,000 at retail arrived, and we sold $7,000 as opposed to $3,600 the year before. We stopped receiving nothing at all for the entire month of June, nothing new that the customers can get excited about, that the sales associates can get excited about, and Lord knows, they just only want to sell the new stuff that comes in. $900 comes in, and we stop receiving. Last year, we brought in $5,000, and that month we took a dive by $1,900, and then next month, $9,600 comes in, a lot more than last year at only $5,000, and our sales are back up. It's important to understand, if you follow the money, follow the inflow. Are we bringing in the right amount of goods? Do we have too much inventory? Do we have too little inventory? These are all questions that can be answered if you know what to look for. Now, there's a second part of the merchandise plan besides just the budgeting, you might say. And when Nico was a small baby, I would tell him this, and he would act very confused. There's a second part, because it's more than just budgeting your purchases. It's also budgeting the amount of holding inventory you have. And that is maybe more important than the actual budgeting of the purchases itself. Now, we know if you want to increase sales, you need to buy more merchandise. That's, that's kind of obvious. If we want to do, on my example, if we want to do $1 million and we're at 50% profit, then we should buy 500,000. If we want to do $1.1 million in sales, we should increase purchases by 50,000 or 550,000. Okay, pretty basic stuff there. But how do you determine how much we should hold? It's a totally different subject. For example, in the fashion business, but every business is a little bit different. But let's say, for example, that we know that we want to hold approximately 10 weeks of inventory. Look, when we talk about right-sizing inventory, it's one of the most significant aspects of your business is knowing how much inventory you should have. We know how much you have, but how much you should have now and in the future, because this is the key. And the key to this is how you think about your stock. Now, many times we have welcoming calls to our new clients, and we set the table, Celeste and I, and we talk about this. Because what we want you to do is think about your inventory, not necessarily in terms of quantity, in terms of cost or retail price or units or SKUs or case packs or dozens. But we want you to think about your inventory in terms of time. Successful retailers think about their inventory in terms of how long is it going to take me to sell this. They're thinking about that. When I ask a successful retailer, professional retailer, how much inventory do you usually carry? He won't tell me the dollar amount or the unit amount. He's going to tell me that he likes to carry maybe about a 13-week supply or an 8-week supply or an 18-week supply, however, whatever the business is, that's the optimum level. That is how you need to start thinking about your inventory. Because ultimately what we're talking about to grow your sales in the big picture is to buy more and to hold less. I know that sounds like jumbo shrimp. I know that does, but it's the secret sauce. Let me give you an example here. You have on the screen. We want to have, let's say we want to sell our inventory every 10 weeks. And by the way, that's about the shelf life of a lot of fashion. So let's say it's every 10 weeks is our shelf life. Well, then 52 weeks in a year, divided by our 10-week supply that we want to keep, and we want to have about a 5.2 turnover. We want to replace our inventory 5.2 times replace our inventory 5.2 times a year. Now, using the previous example of $1 million sales goal with a 50% gross profit, which we're going to purchase again, remember a few minutes ago, we're going to purchase 500,000 at cost, but that's purchasing inventory. How much we hold is a completely different thing. And in this case, if we only want to keep a 10-week supply, then we only want to keep 192,000 at retail or 96,000 at cost. At any given moment, over the course of the year, that is our average inventory. Now, some months will be greater than others. Some months you sell more than other months. And so that will go up and down to a certain degree. But your average investment and cost on $1 million retailer should be a $96,000 inventory investment. This is critical to understand because what happens is when you work with less, you tend to buy more. Let me say that again. When you work with less, you tend to buy more because you need to continue to buy more to bring in new every week, every month, every season. And when that happens, because you can afford to do it, because you have the room on the floor to do it, because you have the capital to do it, because it's not tied up in unselling inventory, then watch your sales balloon. Now, this analysis isn't done just at a store level, of course. It is done at a category level as well. And that's the important place to look at this. But the next section I want to talk about is it's easy sort of to look at how much inventory we have too much. But how do we know if we have too little? How do we know if we don't have enough inventory? How did that store that grew its sales that I showed you in the example by in 1 year, 174,000 or about a 35% increase in revenue in 12 months? How did that store, how did that retailer judge that not only did they have enough inventory, but if they started to buy more and stock more, they'd sell more? Well, let's talk about it in a very simple way. Let's stay with that 5-week, let's stay with that 10-week shelf life. If you carry $120,000 worth of inventory, and you know that it takes you approximately 10 weeks. That's optimum to sell it. Are you going to do $1 million with that? I don't think so. In fact, the maximum, the very best you could do is 624,000 because you simply haven't stocked and bought enough product. And this is what we can help you determine at Management One. This is what we're really good at Management One. So let me show you a couple of things about missed business here. And but having too little. And I want to look at this example. This is actually sweaters. And it's sweaters last fall. And I know these are small, so I'm going to zoom in on this. But you can see the historical sales and the forecasted sales, and you can see the historical inventory. I just want to focus on these two relationships right now. So let's zoom in on that and take a little peeky poo, shall we? We're going to look at last year's sales in sweaters. We did 18,000 in September. Really good month. We're up $7,600. And then sales dropped way down to 15,900. Then they went to 22, and then they dropped to 14,600. Kind of a roller coaster ride here in terms of sales. So why such an irregular sales movement? And then look at their potential. In other words, for next year, their potential is not 18, but 22. Their potential is not 15.9, but almost 30. Now, we don't plan by 10% increase like across the board, like a spreadsheet. We're looking at the absolute potential. We're looking at more than just LY sales. Then you look at, we're planning a 10% increase in November, and then a very large 30% increase in December. Why is that? Because they didn't have any inventory last year. They simply didn't. Last year, their beginning inventory on September 1, 19,967, they sold 18. You think they might have missed some sales. Their beginning inventory on sweaters was 21,000 on October 1, they sold almost 16, down $3,200. Their inventory at the beginning of November was 24,000. They sold almost 23. And on December 1, they had 17,900 and they sold 14,600. Every sweater that was coming in sold out the door. And by any definition that you would look at by a data analysis, you would say that retailer missed business and they have opportunity there. And so what do you need to look at? Follow the money, follow the receipts, follow the inventory, look for those fast turning categories, look for business that you weren't doing because you hadn't received anything. These are all the secret ways to look at this. And by the way, one of the things you're noticing is I'm really not looking at markdowns very much. I'm looking at one of the most important things, growing your sales and keeping that inventory in the right relationship to sales. Not too much, not too little, the Goldilocks formula, if you will. Now, just to keep things moving here, sometimes we need to drill down a little bit and look at information underneath categories. Do you know that in Retail Orbit that typically you can look at subclasses, which we like to call child classes at Management One, especially if you have categories which are all encompassing for open to buy purposes, like accessories, which you see here. It's a good example. So let's take a look and say, how can we use in the global analytics report, how can we use this report to show us where our opportunity is? So let's just examine this one example in this one client in their accessory business. And I'm just going to essentially kind of look at handbags and sunglasses, okay? All hidden under the open to buy called accessories. Well, what's the first thing that I see in terms of handbags? Well, the first thing I see in handbags is that their inventory is 114,000. So about 39.8% of the inventory within the accessory open to buy class is in handbags. But last year, for the entire year, 50% of our sales are in handbags. Last month, 43% were in handbags, and our inventory is 39. Do you see what's happening? As we are reducing our inventory in handbags, so as its relationship to its total percentage of revenue. The sales are up 80.7%, yet we have sold in the last 90 days 102, and we brought in 101. We're not even feeding it. We're selling off slightly inventory in a category that is exploding. And from 50% of the sales, it's now representing last month 43% of the sales. Let's look at sunglasses. First of all, we received $12,000 more sunglasses than we sold. So We're bringing in more than we're selling. That's number one. Sunglasses has a $63,000 inventory. $63,000 in inventory. That's 21%, 21.8% of our inventory and accessories. And sales last month were 14%. For the year, they're 16%. So it's out of whack. So your balance within the child classes within a classification is important to look at. Make sure you feed what's really happening and give it enough product to sell. What if you have multiple stores? Don't shortchange your best store. We see this all the time. This is a client of ours. This is one of their categories. And we're looking again at the Global Analytics report. And we can see that they have 4 stores and a small website. Well, let's take Broadway, because Broadway is clearly, you look at this in this category, and this is true for that it's the number one store. In fact, our sales goal in Broadway was 14,800, and we only sold 12,000. So we missed our goal. Let's drop down to inventory. And here we see the same thing. How much do we own against how much does it sell? 27% of our inventory of our 4 stores is sitting in our flagship store, while our sales last month were 44% of the total, and for the year, 41%. And for the on order, we should be bringing in almost 40% of the buy should be being funneled into the store that's going to give us the most bang for the buck. This is what Management One and Retail Orbit is saying. But that's not what's happening, because the last 90 days, our sales are down 17%. We're taking the other 3 stores are down nowhere near our flagship store. And you can see that we're inventorying pretty much the same amongst all 4 stores. This is not a democracy, and not all stores are equal. And you need to understand that if you have multiple stores. Make sure that you maximize your best store and don't try to give equal amounts of inventory to even the satellite stores where the merchandise will sit and sit and sit and not be productive. Another way to look at this is, what if we have a problem, but we need to isolate the problem? This is one of our clients, and you can see, and so I know this is I'm going to drill in for just a second, but you can see really nice, see where my hand is? Nice sales increases, 72,000, 70, 36,000, 36. There's a little dip in December, $83,000 up in February, and then boom, $2,000 down, $50,000 down, $10,000 down. Why is it? What happened in a really good year? Sales tumbled in the last 90 days. Doesn't seem like it should happen, right? Well, one of the ways, when you can find this, when I see a sales decrease, I want to find out where it is. I need to really break this down into what is causing the sales decrease, because it's not everywhere. And usually it's only in a handful of areas. In this particular case, it was in 3 classifications that you see. And again, I go back to the Global Analytics. Now, we'll be introducing other reports in future Accelerator series presentations. Right now, we're focusing on the plan in Global Analytics. And in Global Analytics, we can see, because this is the last 90 days, the sales went down. What's nice about Global Analytics is looking at the last 90 days. In the last 90 days, dressy dresses were down 15%. Women's bottoms were down 14.9%. And private label, crash and burn, 37% down. In fact, the total decreases were 64,000. Those 3 classifications were $70,000 down. We found the problem. So let's take a look at each one and find out what's going on and what can we do to correct it. And let's start out with dressy dresses. If you look at just April and May, right up here on the plan, we were down $20,000. That's a third of our decrease of 60, right there, just right here. So why did that happen? What happened here? Well, again, let me just go back. I went up 1, 2, but let's follow the money. Let's first of all follow the money on the plan. See, last year we received 53,000 and we sold 56. This year we only received 34 and sold 50. We're down. Last year we were running 56,000 in May, pretty good month for dresses, and we sold 50,000. This year our receivings went down to 18,000 and we sold 34. You think it might have something to do with we just had a lot less new product unpacked to show our customers, to show our sales associates, for them to sell? Now, you know how much I love these boxes down below. Let's blow that up. Here's the same category. See, in the last 3 months, a year ago, we bought in $177,000 worth at retail, worth of dresses. You see my hand right here. And we sold 173. It's a good store. You know, excellent cost of goods purchase. This year, we received, what is that, 44,000 less dresses the last 3 months at retail? And guess how much less we sold? About the same. If you're going to receive less, you're going to buy less. So a third of our decrease was simply we didn't have the dressy dresses to show our customers this year. And if this was something that was planned in the future and say, we're just going to step back from this category, then what you need to do is find where those dollars are going to go to in another category, so this doesn't contribute to an overall sales decline for the business. So look at private label. Remember we talked about private label. The sad part about private label, if we go way down in the corner here, we can look at the margin, 72%, the high profit area. Lots of profit here. But look at the sales decreases up here. Huge. Very, very big problem. So, and you can see the problem down here. But let's blow this part up right over here. So here we were down 18,000 in March. We went from 32,000 to 14, $8,000 down in April, and $5,000 down in May. That's a massive, half of the drop for the company was right here. And this is an easy one to spot, because look at the difference between the historical inventory. We were $18,000 down in inventory. We were $18,000 down in sales. We were $36,000 down. We only had a $21,000 inventory on April 1. We sold $28,000 last year. It's going to be kind of hard to sell $28,000 when you only have 21. Then our inventory dropped to 15,000. You can see here on May 1, and we sold 16.9. The only reason, of course, we sold more is because we probably received more. And this problem is now moving into June, where our inventory is sitting at 13,000. That's all we have. And right now, our trend is going to do about 13,000 in sales against last year's 26. We don't have any inventory. The inventory is gone, and we haven't replaced it. You can also see that in terms of this is coming, because there's another little box on your report called inflow. It's over on the left side, in the metrics side. And one of the things you see is, how much did the plan say? Let's go back in our Wayback Machine. Let's go back in March. The plan said bring in 35,751. We brought in 13,000. April came by and we said, you needed 31,994 to bring in April. We brought in 16,000. And May said, we need to bring in 33,000. We brought in 23,000. We were under receiving every single month. So the plan had already been screaming at this retailer to bring more goods in, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And finally, bottoms. Bottoms has been a chronic underbuyer. You can see the decreases in women's bottoms go on much more than just the last 90 days. And really the story in bottoms, again, lives down here where you see my cursor. So we can see that this has been going on for a while. The last 12 months, our receivings last year were 515 at retail. We sold 441. This year, we reduced the receivings to 461 at retail. Sales went down to 399. The last 6 months, same thing, 7275 against 241, 240 against 213. And the last 3 months, 147,000 came in a year ago in those 3 months, sold 139. This year, we dropped it to 121, sold 126. These boxes here reveal so much about where overbuying or underbuying or where potential is in your business. So, are you underbuying? How do you know? Are you over inventoried? How do you know? Is your inventory fresh? What's the right amount of inventory? Can we drill down and we set up categories, subcategories or child classes within the open to buy classes that can give us more information? Do we have more than one store? Are each one of these stores properly inventoried? Do we know where to look? Have you really looked at your global analysis report? It's a great report and it gives you all kinds of insights into what's happening in your business. And then sometimes you need to identify what's holding your growth back. And to find that out is find out, and it's typically just a very small handful of problem classifications. Can we identify those, and how do we fix them, and what happened? It could be that maybe sometimes it's not just that you didn't buy enough, is you bought the wrong things and the inventory grew, but sales didn't. And so these are just some ideas. This is, by the way, welcome to our first edition. I was a little bit over time, Nico. I apologize, but when you give me the microphone, it's a huge problem. So let's open it up. Do we have any questions, or is everyone going, oh my God, this guy can talk?
Well, probably a little of both, but we do have a question from Matt. He's asking, when you were talking a couple of slides back about vendors, he said, with 300 vendors, big and small, what is a method to keep track of a large source such as this? Is it napkin math? Is it a spreadsheet? How can you drill through each of these?
Well, the first thing, let me just go back to what's a really important thing about getting overstocked. Probably, we often think the number one reason we get overstocked in the categories we don't have a good plan. I actually believe the number one reason we get overstocked in categories we buy too many vendors. And so, it's amazing to me how many times I've talked to a retailer that does $50,000 in a classification and they have like 40 vendors in the class they're buying from. And so that's a really, really quick way. The way to analyze vendors is essentially looking at not so much their margin. Margin's important, but I would look at cash flow. How much merchandise did you buy cost last year, and how much did you sell at retail? And what's the inventory that still hasn't sold? What's your position of inventory? So I want you to start looking at vendor performance in terms of cash flow first and foremost, because I think if you look at simply margin, it can be a misleading metric in many ways.
And we actually developed a vendor performance scorecard. I dropped a link in the chat. Does allow people, now it's not geared for 300, but maybe test it out on one category of vendors and see if that's useful for you. Napkin math, I definitely would not recommend. I was personally messaged a question here from Mike in chat. And Paul, he said, you mentioned subclasses or child classes. How are those different than just standard classes? Why wouldn't you just break them into their own separate categories?
Well, that's a great question. The reason why we call them, actually, it's a management one term, child classes. And the reason why we call them at management one child classes, well, that's not an industry norm, is because we want them to grow into open to buy classes. And so we want you to find, for example, the handbag example that I showed you probably should have its own plan. It should have its own budget. And so when you see that kind of growth, 80% up, and see the inventories not being properly inventoried. In fact, we've actually sold more than we're bringing in. So we know we're jeopardizing revenue there. Then that's the time that it should have its own open to buy plan, because that's going to give you better information. But breaking the categories down into subcategories, I really think is a very, very important part of really understanding what your customer is buying, and thus understanding how to grow your business.
So the end result is really, hopefully, ending up in a class.
We want them to grow from a child class to a parent class or an open to buy classification. That's exactly right.
Excellent. Stacy messaged me on chat and she said, I'm not a client. Where do these numbers come from?
Those numbers all come from our clients, and we take those historical numbers that they're producing us, and then we're turning it around and putting it in a format that they can understand, they can make decisions from, and then also developing a forecast. So how much from that information, this is what happened, this is what from the data, what we believe will happen if you do this. So we're taking historical information that our clients give us and turning that into a future look at their business on what should happen.
And Stacy, I went ahead and chat and put a link to Retail Orbit, is the actual proprietary software that Management One developed specifically to ingest the data directly from your POS system and produce all of those fantastic reports that Paul has been dissecting for the last 30 minutes.
40 minutes. It went on too long.
40 minutes. Thank you. And that was the last question. But if folks are a little shy and you didn't have time or courage to throw a question at Paul, feel free and reach out directly to us at Management One. We're happy to always talk shop. And in our future session, I also wanted to put out a quick poll here just so folks can let us know, what do you want to hear us talk about in the next section? We already have 2 lined up, but I think we can easily schedule in 2024 some future sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and just launch this poll as people leave. Let us know, what is it that you want us to talk about in the next section, and let us know how valuable this one was for you.
And one other thing too, Nico, I would suggest that if you would like us to look at if you're a client, if you would like us to look at your information to give you a new perspective, we would be happy to do that if you contact us to show you exactly some of the things that maybe that you're not seeing within the numbers that you're getting.
Absolutely. So I just put our poll up here. Before you folks step out, please just take 2 minutes and throw a quick rating on here just to let us know how valuable this information was to your business and what topics you'd like to see us discuss in the future, and just drop a little bit of feedback. We'd love to tweak these sessions specifically for you. And we're designing future sessions based on the feedback that we get here. And Paul did mention, for the folks that are not clients, how do you reach out and contact us? I'm going to put that in the chat right now. And there you go. Paul, I wanted to thank you.
And remind them that 3 months, our next one is coming up, which is, are you overstocked, or are you understocked, or are you overbought, or are you underbought? How do you determine these things?
Absolutely. Now, Paul, I'm putting you on the spot here because we've got about 2 minutes while people are filling out these questions. High level, what is the difference between being overbought and having too much inventory? In a sentence.
Well, it gets back to the fact that, you know, merchandise planning is really 2 different distinct aspects. It's how much you should be buying and how much you should be holding or carrying. Those are 2 different issues. But it all depends on how much you should be holding or carrying, is based on what is the right amount of weeks or months supply that you want to keep in your business store. And that can change by classifications, Nico, within a store. So, for example, you might have, if you're an apparel store, if you're a men's apparel store, men's suits are not going to turn as fast as, say, men's shorts are going to turn, because you have to buy more in advance. Inventory is not readily available in season to replenish. There's all kinds of factors on why you'll need a higher amount of months or week supply in some areas of your business than others. And that's how we help our clients. But that's number one, is how much inventory do we need in respect to keeping it turning and flowing in and out. And then the second, of course, is the actual budget itself. You know, how much should you be buying for the business? And of course, we're giving our clients these budgets not based on the total, which I was talking about, but each individual classification. It's its own business, it's its own budget, and we know exactly how much that we should be spending when we go to market in each part of your business, so we're not getting under or overbought.
Excellent. Well, I see some questions.
Let me just add this too. I'm sorry, Nico. And that is based on your gross profit goal. So your gross profit goal. So if your gross profit goal is 40%, we are in a business where you can't get 50%, and you do $1 million in business, then beginning in inventories being the same, you should be at $1 million business with a 40% profit goal. 60% is cost of goods, which would be your open to buy would be $600,000. So it depends on the kind of vertical you're in and the kind of, like jewelry would be much less than that. Jewelry, maybe you might have a 60% profit. So there, on $1 million business, you'd only be investing $400,000.
Fantastic.
Did I do a really good job of absolutely confusing everyone?
No, I think it's actually a good teaser for October 10th. Yeah. And we'll send out a link to register. That is exactly what we're going to be diving into in the next session. Paul, thank you so much for your time. And for anyone that did have to leave a little bit early, we are sending a recording out to all registrants. So I look forward to seeing everybody on the next session. And thanks again for coming.
Bye, everybody.